Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of hopefully many videos to come. My name is Loveless, and tonight we're going to be exploring the maddening depths of the horror found within PT, otherwise known as Silent Hills, and why I find it to be a complete and total masterclass as both a horror game and a piece of marketing history, to the point I'd proclaim it to be one of the greatest horror games of all time, and one of my personal favorite games ever. In this analysis, I'll be taking a thorough look at everything possible both within and surrounding the game, with the end goal of determining how each piece of the game comes together to form a horror experience that's not only utterly bone-chilling, but organic to the point of a shocking degree of surrealism. Since this is my first video, and my first proper analysis of a video game, specifically a piece of fictional horror, I thought it might be appropriate to do a small introduction of myself, so as to help you better understand my background as a horror fanatic, and someone with a passion for video games. I won't take too much of your time here, don't worry. I simply feel it appropriate to make sure you have a proper understanding of my perspective when approaching the subject. Furthermore, it will make for easy reference material for my audience when looking to better understand my perspective and level of experience in the horror genre. To start off, I've been playing video games and watching horror movies my entire life, although my first introduction to the concept of horror in media actually comes from a piece of fiction that's neither horror nor a video game. When I was a kid, I loved dinosaurs. I thought they were just the coolest things ever, and I had an intense fascination with ancient Earth and the idea of things existing outside my ability to even assess them. My mother took notice of my love for dinosaurs and decided I was allowed to watch the cinematic masterpiece known as Jurassic Park. I think I was about 4 years old when I first watched the film, and it completely blew my mind. I was in love, I watched it all the time, and I wore the VHS the hell out. Now, as a child, I obviously didn't quite understand the context for everything that went on in the film, but I knew one thing for certain. This other living thing, completely alive and aware, could and would eat me. The idea that something could so easily just tear apart a full-grown man with complete indifference triggered a sense of unease within me. I've never liked the idea of personally engaging in violence, so to think about these living things partaking in such brutal acts of savagery in a way that was completely second nature to them had me thinking about so much more than my mother probably would have ever guessed. I think I once talked to the kid at the dig site. Why is that kid there, by the way? Whatever. Probably sums up my thoughts the best. Being gutted and eaten alive by a pack of feral creatures is a horrifying concept to try and grasp for anyone, so I guess it probably didn't help that I've always had such a morbid curiosity with the macabre. When I started learning about old-school monsters and horror like Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, and not to mention concepts like Satan and Hades from mythology, I really took my time to read about them and their literary origins. Because of this, I actually felt like I understood them better than some of the other kids. Because of that, I was much more intimidated by them. At the same time, however, I found myself genuinely fascinated by these fictional beings and wanting to learn more. To understand them quickly became a passion of mine, and it has been ever since. My mother once jokingly referred to my memory as selectively photographic because of how, even though I'd sometimes be paying so little attention to something, I couldn't recall it 2 seconds later. There were things from when I was an infant I could recall with vivid detail. The reason I bring this up is because my memory regarding my various experiences with horror are often very vivid, quite probably due to the strong range of emotions such concepts can evoke. I remember being pretty terrified by concepts I'd seen in cartoons as a child, like Courage the Cowardly Dog with King Ramses, and even Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all things. I don't think I have to explain the Ramses bit, but there was something about Pegasus stealing Grandpa's soul through a TV with his magical eyeball that kind of freaked me out. Eventually I found myself in my first true horror game experience, though. A horror experience I would remember for the rest of my life. Resident Evil 3: Nemesis. So I'd always loved me some scary stuff as a kid. It stirred a very morbid curiosity within me, so when I heard they made video games, a medium I was already quite fond of, specifically about horror and trying to make the players scared, I was immediately intrigued. Up to this point, I had already encountered some genuinely frightening moments in games, like the Redeads and Ocarina of Time. I even thought to myself that zombies wouldn't be so bad, because now I could be far away using my guns, and I wouldn't have to run up to them with a sword like in Ocarina of Time. Admittedly, when I first turned on Resident Evil 3 and was immediately surrounded by zombies, I was pretty frightened, but I managed to press on, albeit briefly. Then, he showed up.
Jill! Brad! We've gotta... Jill! Help! No! Brad?
I thought Nemesis would just be some big cool monster boss set piece, but no. This thing straight up murdered my boy Brad, turned to me and was like, "Bitch!" And I just stood there like, "Ah!" He then proceeded to charge at me, so I ran, made a save as quick as possible, turned the game off and said, "Nope."
So, what do I do? Do I run or do I fight?
Yeah, I'm gonna fucking run.
So there you go. That was my first experience with a horror game. Fast forward a couple of decades, and here I am just having gotten the Platinum Trophy for the Resident Evil 3 remake. By the way, when I first started drafting this, I actually had it typed as hyped for the upcoming remake of Resident Evil 3. And I just gotta say, it feels good making that edit. Anyways, over the years, I've always had a fascination with the horror genre. Not just with video games, but with film, television, literature, music. I don't know, I guess that counts.
Alright. You wanna play like that? Let's fucking go. Yeah. Come on. That's what I'm talking about. Come on. Come on. Come on. Get him. Woo. Woo.
Anyways, I remember my second attempt at this newfangled horror gaming being Resident Evil 2. I was still quite young, but now that Nemesis wasn't in it, I'd figured I'd be alright. I played it, got scared as hell when the zombies came through the gun store window, and persisted, but finally gave up when I first encountered William Birkin. Look, I wasn't a brave boy. For a while, I was actually too scared to play horror games. In retrospect, it was kind of hilarious. I remember seeing Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube at my local Blockbuster and thinking, hell no, those games are way too scary for me. Ironic, huh?
Stop that plane!
But eventually I found myself getting that itch, you know, where you just really need a fresh experience from some games. This was around 2007 or so. I'd played the hell out of Devil May Cry 3 and heard DMC was basically a brother series to Resident Evil. So I decided, you know what? Let's go back and check out some Resident Evil. I'd also seen the first 3 live-action movies at this point, and say what you will about them, believe me, there is a lot to say about them. The first 2, at least, were fun, schlocky, early 2000s era action romps, and I can credit them as having reignited my interest in the franchise. Anyways, I was really itching for some Resident Evil, and I was using GameFly at the time, and had recently finished The Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones. Great game, by the way. Really need to revisit them again. Oh look, we're getting remakes. Yeah. So I figured I'd put Resident Evil 3 down for my next game. Of course, stupid preteen me forgot that my PS1 memory card had recently broke and I didn't have the money to replace it. So when RE3 did come in the mail, I couldn't save any of my progress when I played it. And it was a school night. What a time. The weekend was coming up though, so I spent Friday night looking at online guides and getting a real feel for the game before I finally sat down with it Saturday and beat it in one sitting. I loved it, and by the time I was done, I was itching for more. I tried other games here and there over the following year. Of course, I went back to Resi 2, and then I started trying out other games like Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, Condemned 2 Bloodshot, Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, Fatal Frame, Alone in the Dark, Fear, and even the Western Silent Hill games. Yeah, I know. Now, obviously, not all of these titles were masterpieces by any stretch, but I was usually able to find some level of enjoyment in them. Such as the strong opening act of Condemned 2, the weird fourth wall breaking antics of Eternal Darkness, the simplistic but strong Japanese horror of Fatal Frame, and hell, despite all of its flaws, and there are many, Call of Cthulhu introduced me, alongside that episode of Billy and Mandy, to the works of H.P. Lovecraft, which have become some of my favorite pieces of work in literature as a whole. Eventually, in early 2011, I came across Dead Space 2 at my local rental place and decided to go ahead and give it a shot. I'd heard great things about the Dead Space games, so I figured this was my chance to hop on board the hype train. I played through the game, and honestly, at the time, it had become my favorite horror game ever. Sure, it had a bit more action going on, but it felt more thrilling and intense, rather than just nonsensical Hollywood-style action set pieces like what you'd get from Resident Evil 4 and 5. The Dead Space franchise often gets compared to the Alien movies, with the first one being a landmark title in sci-fi horror, the second ramping up the thrills while still maintaining a strong atmosphere of survival horror, and the third one just being a complete and total disaster that's a disgrace to the franchise and all but killed it. So, for a while, as far as horror games went, excluding the third one, Dead Space had set quite the bar for me, and having revisited it again recently, going so far as to platinum Dead Space 1 and 2,
Dead Space 2! Boom, 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 boom. Hard to the fucking car!
it's a franchise I've come to hold a lot of love for. But then came that game. You know the one I'm talking about. The game that completely set the internet ablaze. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. What's funny is that my first introduction to Amnesia was a purely comical one. It was about mid-September 2011, the Let's Play trend was only just starting to gain serious traction, and a friend of mine sent me a link to a PewDiePie video of him playing a mod called The Dark Room. It was a goofy as hell video of a custom story featuring various memes from the time, including Nyan Cat, Pedo Bear, and Trollface. God, I feel old. And while I found the video pretty funny, I was pretty interested in the game itself, too. I especially took notice of the shrill sound of the chase sequences and the way puzzles were physics-based, something I'd come to appreciate thanks to Portal. Anyways, I found myself watching PewDiePie videos of this game all the time. I thought they were fun, and the game was just awesome looking. This was about a year or so before PewDiePie really exploded into popularity, having only about 53,000 subscribers at the time, if memory serves me correct. And while I understand Amnesia, and subsequently horror games in general, would kind of dissolve into Let's Play fodder for some time in the following years, I still think Amnesia itself is a phenomenal title, and Frictional did more right than most horror game developers could ever dream of doing. I mean, hell, without Amnesia, we probably wouldn't have games like PT, Resident Evil 7, Outlast, Visage, obviously Soma, Layers of Fear, Slender, and even Alien Isolation. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Amnesia, but it's such a huge, influential title that to not give it at least a mention would feel like something of a war crime. Amnesia really reignited my love for the horror genre, but it wasn't just games, I also really loved horror movies. Some of my favorite films ever include The Ring, Ju-On, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Thing, The Void, Drag Me to Hell, The Fly, and even more recently, The Color Out of Space. For the sake of throwing in some additional horror influences of note, I'm a huge fan of the works of Junji Ito, George Romero, rest his spirit, Guillermo del Toro, John Carpenter, and H.P. Lovecraft. As far as television goes, I love the first 4 seasons of The Walking Dead, as well as the first half of Season 7. I love the entirety of the TV series Hannibal, which is so incredible that I might as well make a series of videos just for it at some point in the future. Additionally, titles like The Last of Us, Call of Duty Zombies, Bloodborne, Dying Light, Fallout, Mass Effect, Death Stranding, and even Batman Arkham Asylum are worthy of some honorable mentioning. I know some of these titles aren't necessarily a part of the horror genre itself, but I still feel they need mentioning, as they usually tackle some sort of aspect of horror that's unique, or at least interesting in some way. For example, The Last of Us is Infected are a genuinely unique take on the, at that point, grossly overused undead concept, and Bloodborne is just incredible. Seriously, Bloodborne has some of the most horrifying and downright breathtaking creature design I've ever seen in fiction, and the ways it conveys cosmic horror in the classic style of H.P. Lovecraft is utterly phenomenal. Absolutely brilliant. And finally, I feel the need to give a shout out to the SCP Foundation. I couldn't really think of an appropriate way to segue into that, but screw it. SCP is damn good stuff, and I refuse not to give it the mention it deserves. My favorite, if I had to pick one, would be SCP-035. That mask is goddamn wicked. So yeah, I've been around the block when it comes to horror, but never has any piece of fiction, never has any horror experience given me the sheer terror that I have felt in that hallway in PT Silent Hills. PT is the type of game that will eventually become something of an urban legend. It's downright terrifying, vividly memorable to anyone who's played it, and yet its unavailability means that, unlike most games, not many people will ever get to experience the sheer terror of that corridor. For most pieces of media, rarity and exclusivity are often only tied to the price of admission. Gamma Attack for the Atari 2600 may be the rarest and most valuable game in existence, but anyone with the money can purchase it from the seller and expect to see it arrive in their mailbox a couple of days later. And once they do, the only real bragging rights they have are that they spent $500,000 on some plastic junk. However, for a piece of horror media, let alone one so effectively terrifying as PT, these things tend to make the experience somehow stronger. Things are more isolated and unnerving. It's an experience you can talk about, potentially even share through streaming and videos, but the only way for anyone else that you're sharing it with to really sit down and experience the game for themselves, the frustration, the fear, the confusion, is to buy a PS4 that has the game downloaded and give it a playthrough. Unlike most rare games, PT is actually worth playing and experiencing for yourself because it manages to evoke so many powerful emotions from the player, the greatest of course being fear. It's not unlike the tape from The Ring, minus the part where you die in 7 days, where it has this sinister air surrounding it that makes you think that perhaps you're getting into something you shouldn't be. I think Nakey Jakey said it best.
Yeah, PT gets its own section of the video because it is easily, like without a doubt in my mind, the most terrifying piece of media I have ever experienced. Movie, TV show, book, song, podcast, whatever. Nothing even comes close to PT. This shit is actually cursed.
Mama Jakey, you could not have been more dead on. PT itself is almost a literal ghost. Data from a game we'll never see that can still be interacted with despite its inability to be found conventionally. The fact that this thing exists in my PS4 hard drive is haunting in its own way. I'm going to be breaking this series down into a number of categories I'll be discussing in as much depth as humanly possible. Starting with an intro to PT, I'll be discussing how the game was presented to players and how it was effective in making people come together to try and solve this bizarre puzzle of a game. I suppose the primary focus will be marketing and the overall presentation, and then I'll follow with storytelling. Storytelling will be much more interpretive, and it will focus on trying to figure out what happened in the game's canon. Following that, I'll focus on the atmosphere and be specifically discussing how the superficial and mechanical facets of PT come together to frighten the players. I'll then be moving on to the puzzles, and talking about them in the order in which the player has to solve them, how they defy typical design philosophy, and why I believe that they work at a core level despite some criticisms that may come up. Following this will be a bit of fun, where I talk about the radio and analyze just what the heck is going on with that thing. And then comes what I believe to be the main course, Lisa, where I'll be spending a great deal of time talking about everything there is to say surrounding her. And believe me when I say this will be one hell of a rabbit hole. Finally, after all of that, I'll be going into post-Silent Hills and lamenting my sorrows as I discuss the legacy of PT. This will serve as my concluding piece, and I'll also take the time here to discuss future content plans. And lastly to note, throughout the series I'm going to be using videos from other channels and streamers, because I feel it's important to highlight the numerous experiences people had with this game during its brief lifetime, as well as the number of findings within it that have surfaced over the years. My primary sources will include the Super Best Friends, Soapy Warpig, Lance McDonald, and I will even occasionally reference other channels such as Nakey Jakey, as I did earlier, Girlfriend Reviews, PewDiePie, Markiplier, and perhaps a few others. Right now I'm still kinda sorting through them, but if they do come up, I'll be sure to put them in a window of sorts and give them due credit. The last thing I want in my YouTube debut is to start any sort of drama or come off as if I'm mooching. Rest assured that if I do use someone else's content, it's only as reference to something I simply couldn't capture in my own footage, which I have several hours of, including friends playing it for the first time. So, with all that finally laid out, I suppose now is as good a time to actually start talking about PT. Silent Hills.
2048 63 2048 63 2048 63
Fix this damn bug before release. Cause? Question mark.
The marketing of PT was a stroke of pure genius that will likely never be replicated again. That probably sounds like a rather bold claim to the uninitiated, so allow me to start from the very beginning of this tale with the world reveal of PT.
Peggy 18.
Watch out. The gap in the door. It's a separate reality. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?
This is for the players.
It was Gamescom 2014, and Hideo Kojima, against Konami's wishes, decided to present a trailer for an upcoming demo simply titled PT. Of course, at the time, nobody knew Kojima was behind this. In fact, what we saw in that brief teaser trailer was all anyone knew about the game leading up to its release in the PlayStation Store. Based on what we were given, it appeared to be yet another generic first-person indie horror game looking to capitalize on the jump-scare internet reaction trends that had become so prevalent at the time. To be 100% frank, this trailer did not look very impressive, and although I have no real citation for this, I think it's a fair assumption that a lot of people did not seem that interested in the product. Something we all know would change quite drastically when the truth was finally brought to light. Then on the 12th of August, 2014, the world of video games was changed forever. PT dropped, and it completely swept its players away. I remember being a part of the quest to solve PT, talking amongst my peers in my college dorm, and discussing whatever it was we managed to find on the internet. My roommate and I were completely floored by how impressive this demo was, and it wasn't long before we realized there was simply no way this title was put together on a shoestring budget by some no-name indie studio. On top of the foggy aesthetic and rich Japanese horror, there was this unwavering sense that there was more to this game than we initially knew. And it wasn't just my roommate and I. The internet was on fire with people trying to figure out just what the hell the deal with PT was. Then, later that very night, we got our answer from a Twitch streamer known as Soapy Warpig, whose name will now forever be a part of video game history. I doubt you are, but if you're watching this, well done, Soapy.
This is so strange. Oh, the phone's ringing! The phone's ringing! Now what?
You've been chosen.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh. Nice one, Mark. You win that prize. Okay. The phone rang. That was good. Now what? That was exciting, wasn't it? We're getting there. It's happening. Bathroom. Okay, bathroom. Here we go. I'm going. This is what teamwork gets us, people. It gets results. Okay. That's what happens. Maybe we should go on the next loop? Oh, that felt so satisfying, like you wouldn't even believe. Oh, I feel good. Okay. I heard a door unlock. Did you? Well, it wasn't the front door. I'll try the one behind us. Make sure I look at everything first. Okay, let's get back. Maybe it was this door. I'll try this door. If not, we'll go back and go and reset the loop again. But that was great news. Oh, let's check these pictures. Are they just normal, are they? Yeah. Tree. I don't... No, it's locked. Okay, well that was good. I think that's the end of that loop, if that makes sense. Let's pop on through again. Oh, that was so satisfying. As I said, it's very strange. There's a weird sense of, like, terror and puzzling stuff at the same time. Let's just make sure we look at that, and let's go. Oh, it's pitch black! Nothing's happening.
Damn, you're such a drag. Every day he'd eat the same kind of food, dress the same, sit in front of the same kind of game. Yeah, he was just that kind of guy. But then one day he goes and kills us all. He couldn't even be original about the way he did it. I'm not complaining. I was dying of boredom anyway. But guess what? I will be coming back, and I'm bringing my new toys with me.
Oh my gosh, we're outside. Oh my god. I think we're at the end! Oh, fucking brilliant! Oh god, I feel so good! I feel good, I feel pumped. Oh my god! Oh my god! Hideo Kojima! What? Oh my gosh! The secret's being revealed! Oh my gosh! This is brilliant! Oh my god! This is fucking crazy. What? Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! Oh my god! It is! It's Silent Hill! We did it! Oh, we did it, guys! This is fucking mental! Oh, the three of us, the four of us together. That was insane! Oh my god. Oh, that was crazy. Fox Engine. Christ almighty. Jesus. Oh god, I'm all like shaky now. That was insane. Oh god, I'm all shaky. Oh, that was brilliant! Oh, that was great!
What's important to understand about the quest to solve PT is that progress was actually going along quite fine until players found themselves on the game's final puzzle, which is so obtuse it managed to bring all progress across the internet to a screeching halt, at least for a while. To this day, nobody except Kojima and maybe a few of his designers know for a fact what the final puzzle solution truly is, step for step. However, we do understand what you generally have to do to complete it, so it's not impossible to beat by any means, but even then, no one is capable of definitively saying, this is factually how you solve the final puzzle of PT. It's something of a crapshoot where you hope to do the things accurately enough that the game deems you worthy of the reward. Every now and then when you're playing, even if you've done it a million times and you're double checking your actions using the most accurate guide possible, there is still a chance it may not work for you. Or maybe the baby's laugh will be triggered before or even after you've completed what you believe to be the particular step of the puzzle. I think this is a particularly positive reflection of the game's legacy as a whole and why it's such a brilliant piece of Japanese horror. Even though we can beat it and we know the name of the final product it was leading us towards, there are still numerous questions that will forever remain unanswered. Specifics we'll never be able to properly pin down, being subject to our mere speculation until the end of time, or until Kojima decides to spill the beans. I vividly remember playing PT with a friend of mine once, and even though both of us had done it countless times at that point, for some reason no matter what we said into the mic, Jared, Jay, Jareth, Jack, Lisa, etc., the baby just would not giggle. So we said screw it, and turned around to do another loop only to find Lisa flying towards us, causing us to scream in sheer terror. Bear in mind this was the first time we had ever seen her do that, and it was probably 2 AM on a weekday in a college dorm. To our neighbors Ken and Quinn, I truly am sorry. Hell, even more recently when I was just gathering footage for this video, when I went to do the final puzzle, something really odd occurred. I was doing the final puzzle whilst in a party chat, working under the assumption that since party chat audio was prioritized, my microphone noise wouldn't be properly processed by the game itself. Mid-conversation, all of a sudden I hear the baby laugh. I was immediately stunned. Was the game processing all noise being inputted into the PS4 system versus the game? On top of this, what did I even say to trigger the laugh? The confusion had me pondering what had just happened for the rest of the night. This demo from nearly 6 years ago was still surprising me. I think Girlfriend Reviews actually said it best.
Then, if you want to get the super secret ending that reveals the trailer for Silent Hills, you have to look up how to do it online because it's not so much a puzzle as it is a secret Illuminati handshake.
It's almost like an initiation you just have to figure out for yourself if you want to be accepted into Kojima's weird inner circle of J-horror fanboys. I'll talk more about the final puzzle later on, but the point to remember here is just how absurdly difficult it was to solve this thing. Gamers everywhere were surfing forums trying to solve the final puzzle, which was ultimately Kojima's plan. Kojima wanted a horror experience that made people scratch their chins, put on their detective caps, and come together to figure out what it all means. Kojima's known for playing with the fourth wall, if not blowing it open entirely, see Sons of Liberty.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
Raiden, something happened to me last Thursday when I was driving home. I had a couple of miles to go. I looked up and saw a glowing orange object in the sky to the east.
And PT was definitely no exception. PT is a bizarre game no matter how you look at it. For starters, when you boot the game up, there's no main menu. Even with demos, that kind of practice is pretty uncommon. I love this. It's almost as if your PS4 dashboard itself is the main menu, and you know you're just one click away from being dropped headfirst into that terrifying L-shaped corridor. It acts almost as a constant tether between the player and the game itself. Even the pause menu is mostly superficial. This menu is pretty bare bones, you can adjust various minor settings, but for the most part you won't have much of a reason to use it. However, if you think you can use it to hide from the ghost Lisa, then you're in for a big surprise because, as it turns out, she can just grab you right out of it.
Thank you for your follow. Yeah, Kojima is fucking amazing. I mean,
Yes, Lisa can break the pause menu and instantly kill you. On top of that, you can find a literal puzzle piece of one of the game's minor puzzles in the pause menu. Honestly, this is just so awesome. It makes use of the pause menu in a way that completely subverts player expectations while simultaneously making sure that the pause doesn't serve as a safe zone for the player in case they get too scared. If anything, it's quite dangerous to try it. A lot of games have pause menus that are just little windows where you can still see what's going on in-game. PT does something that's very fresh, aesthetically speaking, and allows you to see just a little bit of what's in-game at the top edge of the screen. You're allowed to see just the tiniest little bit, which is frightening on a more subconscious level for those who do not notice this little detail. Because of all of this, pausing when you feel you're in danger is basically the equivalent to closing your eyes and hoping the monster goes away. It may mess with you and pretend it's not there, but if it wants to grab you, it will. Furthermore, if you allow yourself even a peek, you might see something particularly unsettling. What makes this even more unnerving is that the pause menu does in fact pause the game. If you pause the game while the radio is on, it will stop and pick up where you left off when you leave the pause menu. This means that Lisa herself operates outside the rules of the game, a fact that left me with goosebumps as soon as I came to the realization. I know I have a whole section dedicated to Lisa, so I'll try to avoid talking too in-depth about her, but that being said, she will be popping up a lot throughout these videos. What can I say? She's the star of the show. This style of intentionally unorthodox design that subverts the idea of a fourth wall establishes that the game is not something you play, but the game is something that you experience as it plays you.
Touch that dial now, we're just getting started. Retrieved the rifle and shot his wife as he was cleaning up the kitchen. You can't trust the tap water. Though the son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot him too. His 6-year-old daughter had the good sense to hide in the bathroom, but reports suggest he lured her out by telling her it was just a game. The girl was found shot once in the chest from point-blank range. The mother, who was shot in the stomach, was 204-863. Seen after neighbors called 911, found the father in his car listening to the radio. Several days before the murder, look behind you. I said, look behind you, like he was chanting some strange spell. There was was another family shot to death in the same state last month, and in December last year, a man used a rifle and meat cleaver to murder his entire family. In each case, the perpetrators were fathers. State police say this string of domestic homicides appears under 204863. Child care and other social issues facing the average family.
And that, to me, is exactly what great horror does. Control is something that, when granted, provides a semblance of clarity, thus allowing us to feel comfort in some way. If we feel as though we have a firm grasp of the situation, we won't be nearly as frightened by it. PT is especially brilliant because it makes sure to remind the player through a varying number of immediately apparent design choices that they are not in control, and they will not be in control at any point throughout the experience. It's brilliant. On another topic pertaining to the presentation, there are very few instances of dialogue or reading notes that come up, and they all usually come without any degree of context to the player outside of their own personal inference. This is to be expected from a demo, but more often than not when you do encounter any dialogue or notes in PT, it will either be directed outright at you, or spoken in a way that makes you just kind of lean back and wonder, "You talking to me?" And I don't mean the player character, I mean you, the player, specifically. When you have a game that's so incredibly vague and esoteric, it can be extremely discomforting and even disorienting when it decides to focus its lens on you. It's almost as if the game itself is looking right back at you, pointing at you, signaling you out and letting you know it's almost aware of your existence, and that the player character is just some avatar. In a game where everything seems so heavily grounded in realism, it's disorienting when you suddenly are referred to, even indirectly. It's simultaneously creepy and even invasive feeling when you're so immersed that even the game seems to become aware of your presence. When it comes to the presentation of PT, everything is put together with the idea that the player is not only heavily immersed, but actively engaged in a way that makes them feel like they themselves are walking through the hallway as all these horrific events unfold. While the photorealism and stellar sound design certainly help immerse us, I believe it's PT's unconventional methods of playing with the fourth wall, coupled with its very well thought out pacing and structure, that truly make it engaging as a whole. From the moment we start playing, the game's roots in Japanese horror help acclimate us to the setting. PT starts you off in a mostly familiar environment that almost comes off as comfortable, albeit quite messy and having questionable design choices. You just can't shake the feeling, though, that something is off. It's honestly difficult to pinpoint, but something really just doesn't feel right. Sure, the house is clearly a mess, and the creaking of the light in the front entryway is a bit creepy, but for the most part it's just a comfortable little hallway. Then you cross through the second door, and suddenly you realize something is up.
Your neighbors called 911, found the father in his car, listening to...
Oh yeah, the objective is to escape.
Escape?
That's it.
Shit's locked.
Shit's locked.
Jeez, that door animation.
Okay, well.
Looks like a very similar hallway.
Hello? Well, it's definitely got the mood right. And by right, I mean horrible. Oh, good! Oh, good, it's an endless loop. I love when I get stuck in an endless loop of nightmares.
Let's go downstairs. This is the same hallway. Ah! It's going to be one of those things. Just a never-ending loop. Okay.
What is wrong with people? What? Isn't this the... It is the same corridor!
Before the murders, neighbors say they heard the father repeating a sequence of numbers in a loud voice. They said it was like he was chanting some strange spell.
Oh, Jesus. Ooh. Ooh, okay. Just a door opening. This seems very familiar.
I think that first time going through the loop door is something that sticks with every player to some extent. Pretty much everyone I've ever seen play this game has taken a moment to go, huh, upon going through for the first time. The game then slowly begins to introduce one piece of the puzzle after another, having started off simple with a radio broadcast about men murdering their families, and eventually kicking into high gear with full-blown acid trips culminating in a woman being murdered off-screen, while the same voice from the radio rants about society being rotten to the core.
Upstanding folks got their welfare cut, got their jobs pulled out from under us. Now's the time. Do it.
The various quirks and oddities prompt the player to ask questions, sometimes subconsciously and sometimes quite actively. The game does a stellar job of piling these questions on in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming until the horror itself is. It lures us in by immersing us before making it feel as though we were never meant to step foot inside these accursed halls. At first things are spooky, and you have some questions, but it isn't until later that you're nearly collapsing under the weight and sheer terror of it all. It's almost a literal rabbit hole, and by the time you realize the extent of the nightmare, it's far too late. There are a vast number of mysteries surrounding PT that keep the player's curiosity at a peak even after the game has been turned off. PT isn't just posing unanswerable questions for the sake of mystique, however. It commands genuine curiosity from the player by raising questions you feel can actually feasibly be answered, or at least speculated on with some degree of accuracy. Wonder and horror go hand in hand. If the audience knows everything, then there's typically nothing to fear. But on the flip side, if you just make everything unknowable and vague, then there will always be a certain degree of engagement that's detracted from the experience. There's a significant difference between being encouraged to come up with answers and being forced to fill in plot holes. For example, Lovecraft is known for keeping things vague and creepy, but he does a good job at making sure you know just enough to keep your mind going and your imagination running wild. He's subtly directing us to imagine horrors as close to the unimaginable as we can, causing a certain degree of mental exhaustion that leaves us vulnerable to the real horrors in store for us. PT is much the same, as it strikes a balance between the two issues masterfully by making you feel like the answers to any questions you have are just out of arm's reach. But because it's only a demo for a game that was ultimately cancelled, you'll never be able to have a solid grasp on those answers. Try and try as you like, no matter how hard you reach, you'll never get a hold of the answer you seek. At least not with maximal certainty. It all comes together brilliantly. PT presents paranormal concepts within a familiar environment, adding a real sense of tangibility to everything that occurs in the game, thus allowing us to be properly immersed. It's a very disturbing kind of psychological horror that feels invasive, which again furthers on the idea that everything in PT is working in a very unconventional way, with the end goal of completely subverting the fourth wall and scaring the player half to death. Because of this, it begins to feel much more real than any other horror game has ever managed so far. It's not about looking real, although it certainly does, or having a particularly scary monster, which I would also argue it does. It's about feeling so real that the player themselves begin to ask questions that lead them further down the rabbit hole. It's a unique brand of horror that can shake a person to the core if they let just the right amount of it in. PT is a pretty damn spooky game on a superficial level, sure. The graphics are photorealistic, the sound design is genuinely bone-chilling, it references both possible and historical real-world events, and hell, Lisa is enough to scare the shit out of just about anyone. But where PT truly begins to feel very eerily tangible is when you begin to look at how unconventionally it works on a mechanical level. The way it draws the player in with obtuse storytelling that relies mostly on the player's ability to read the environment and put together extremely vague pieces of an unknowable puzzle, the way its mechanics and puzzles invite you to think outside the box and take approaches you wouldn't even think to take in other games. PT is the complete package, and I've honestly never experienced anything like it, even in games that shamelessly try to emulate what it accomplished. Even with games that mimicked Amnesia, there was always some degree of iteration going on, but I defy you to name a game that has a final puzzle remotely like that of PT's. I'm sure someone has made one out there somewhere, but for the life of me, I can't find it, and as of the recording, I have not played it. Now, it's not to say that every concept in PT is entirely original. Fourth wall breaks, the Onryo, radio shenanigans, we've seen all of this before, sure, but what makes PT special is how everything comes together so cohesively and organically. To reference Nicky Jakey once again,
this shit is just the ultimate cocktail of interactive terror.
All of the game's systems and mechanics come together in a way that feels natural, thus more real and tangible, and thus more horrifying. If even one aspect of PT was half-baked or mediocre, the whole experience would be strongly affected by it. That's part of the reason I wanted to start talking about the presentation, because now that we have a clear picture of what exactly PT is going for, and the general design philosophy, we can now assess the rest of the game and gauge just how well it does so. I suppose now I should make it clear that although I will be providing personal input in doses, I'm going to do my best to analyze PT as objectively as possible, though I can't guarantee I'll succeed as I do have a very strong love for the product. I really want to try and reach the crux of just what it is that makes this experience so haunting and give the game the credit it deserves. So that about does it for the presentation of PT. It's honestly surreal to finally have this portion of the essay and now the video done. That's one section down, to counting my personal intro, I guess, with about 6 more to go. We've obviously still got a long way to go, but I sincerely appreciate it if you've even made it this far. I'm not exactly expecting this to blow up or anything, but as someone aspiring to create my own works of horror someday, this kind of project means a great deal to me. And I'm hoping that it isn't just some massive flop from the perspective of my audience, whether it be just one person or 100. I guess the typical YouTuber line here is to like, share, subscribe, etc., but if you are interested in PT and studying its value as a piece of fictional horror, then you should definitely subscribe and stay tuned for further analysis. Like I said, I got about half a dozen more sections to go here, and there will be plenty of content for you to indulge in if this is your thing. Also, if there is anything at all I can ask of you, it's to leave a comment telling me what you think, not just about Silent Hills, but about my work so far, and any positives or negatives you could think of to help me focus on so as to improve in future content. I welcome all criticism, provided it's actually constructive, of course, and genuinely appreciate any amount of praise there is to give. So don't be shy to throw either at me if you feel what you have to say can be slightly meaningful to me as a creator. Anyways, a sincere thanks to all of those who've made it this far with me. I do hope to see you again next time. If you do find this video to be meaningful, then, well...
Don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started.